Book of Hours is determined to remain an essential platform that offers a creative interpretation for lockdown skeptics and experts who have been censored by mainstream press. Thanks to your donations, we can carry on doing this essential work as working artists. These big issues of the day are vital and need to be heard. So please share our videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel, make a one-time donation on our PayPal page, but most importantly, please be a part of our team on our Patreon page. Go to patreon.com/bookofhours and hit the blue button titled Become a Patron. Thank you.
When you hear the term worker-owned cooperative, you might get the warm fuzzies and think of something even more grassroots or down-home than a philanthropic nonprofit. You may think of locals getting together, forming an idea or a collective, and building their community relationships through this cooperative effort, whether it's a farmer's market or a grocery store or some kind of service like a bakery that benefits a tight-knit community. There is a story of failure in a worker-owned cooperative, and sadly, it's a narrative that supports the notion that the cooperative model cannot be scaled up to fit larger businesses or work in other contexts or places. At the same time, this is a story that lifts up a co-op as a model for healing neglected post-industrial economies in the American heartland. In this story, both narratives are true and both are not. The evergreen cooperatives are a good example of the possibility of worker-owned cooperative businesses succeeding in providing a higher standard of living for the workers who own the means of production and have a democratic say in how the company does business.
But possibility is not the same thing as actuality. In actuality, the story of the evergreen cooperatives is a cautionary tale to cooperatives seeking funding. It's a story that is a warning to not let outside influence or management take over the organization and change its very essence from being worker-owned to being owned. From its beginning, the evergreen cooperatives were created and promoted as a model that had a mission larger than it probably should have, but was seen as a way of doing business that benefited the workers as well as the community they lived in. Unlike a lot of cooperatives, the worker-owned evergreen cooperatives were not created by the people who wanted to start a cooperative business. The organizations were created by outside nonprofit organizations that funded them, with their mission baked into expected outcomes. The idea was to create cooperative businesses that could be a model for other cities to make a positive impact in their communities while helping to improve the economies of those cities. Instead, the funders brought in professionals from the outside, and this created a situation in which a lack of understanding of what a cooperative business is led to mismanagement and a loss of clients and income. The managers acted like the worker owners were just employees and not the company itself.
The very people who were the backbone of the institution, who could have saved the businesses from collapse and understood the means of generating new clients and revenue, were instead used to commodify the cooperatives and market them as a concept. As a result, the concept of the model became more important than the co-ops themselves, and ultimately created a situation that was viewed as the failure of cooperatives to meet the expectations of the model. This kind of confusion and chaos is always what happens when investment in a business is tied to rules, specified results, and measurable outcomes, which are nothing more than computer-generated reports based on financial analysis and checking off boxes instead of what the community actually needs.
Social impact investing is an investment strategy that claims its focus is on achieving a positive social impact while at the same time producing a return on investment for the investor. These impact investments may say their focus is on achieving a positive social impact, but really it's about producing a return on investment for the investor, outside professionals, or stakeholders. One of the most important investment tools or instruments of investment is the Social Impact Bond, or SIB. SIBs have been around for about 10 years. The language and support for social impact bonds is always very positive, as in, making the world a better place. The champions of SIBs always focus on the positive social impact aspect and conveniently leave out the profit that investors make as a result of their investment.
For instance, let's say a nonprofit organization wants to provide poor children in a given community eyeglasses because the impact of this would save the community thousands of dollars in the future. The marketing team sets to work on creating a compelling story. The story says that if children can see the chalkboard, then they will be able to learn better and thus perform better in school. And in the end, they'll be eligible for the better jobs and they contribute more wealth to the economy. Sounds great, but is this a win-win when the true motivations for investors are to simply make a profit from a perceived need that is also a marketing ploy? What are the underlying outcomes for society at large when profit is put into the context of providing a public good? Especially when the public good is something that has traditionally been provided by government for the public sector without profit in mind. We see many examples of this throughout various economies, where various organizations, non-governmental or otherwise, are suddenly built into local economies, offering services to the underprivileged in the community. They run fundraising campaigns, ask for donations from the community, and host events to raise money. This is all feel-good stuff, but what it does is it burdens the community with having to pay for something that the government already provides through the community's tax base. Now, with that in mind, what happens when impact investors want to see a positive impact when they invest in a cooperative? Impact investors falsely claim in their reports and their analysis that employee-owned co-ops and co-ops in general are complex and difficult to understand. But not to worry, the impact investor will have just the right engineering skills, which will change the structure of the co-op to the benefit of everyone.
This is a recipe for failure. Additionally, impact investors do not necessarily like the idea of democratically run businesses. They see them as lacking structure or management. They, however, do like the idea of marketing the idea of a co-op by focusing on language that sounds good, like setting the goals of eliminating income inequality and telling the stories of individual lives to show why employee ownership matters. This is a red flag, for if the investors like the story of the investment more than the investment itself, the cooperatives are only creating more problems and confusion for themselves.
In the past, social impact investments have been focused on third sector organizations like nonprofit organizations, but have also invested in benefits corporations and mission-driven companies. It's more recent that social impact investment has turned to co-ops or employee-owned businesses. This is common in American economies. Private sectors of society see the success of grassroots organizations in smaller economies and co-opt their ideas for their own profit. But these investors have more often relied on the third sector to provide solutions for a problem that often didn't exist through social impact investments for government-backed social services that already exist. And when that happens, the results are often detrimental to the community because social impact investments, whether through bonds or other means, can undermine democracy, curtail human rights, or perpetuate wealth inequality, which, ironically, is the opposite of what they say they are trying to do. The more recent engagement with co-ops and worker-owned businesses has had the same or worse effect. But these new approaches are in forms not necessarily seen in the nonprofit or third sector arena. Instead, similar to the evergreen co-op case, impact investors are using incubators to create co-ops to meet the challenges of the solution to the problem they may want to solve. And as we pointed out, oftentimes this problem may not even exist.
An incubator develops an idea that can eventually be transformed into a business model. They have no specific time frame on when to launch the business while keeping a loose structure in which to grow the business. They offer wraparound services like counseling, network spaces, mentorship, and put businesses in touch with investors. They typically ask for a 2 to 10% stake in a business, whether it's worker-owned, a cooperative, or a more traditionally organized company. In other cases, certain approaches use existing co-ops to sell an idea or concept that will attract investors to a social impact financial instrument, such as reducing wealth inequality or creating a shared sense of ownership and responsibility for communities and workplaces.
Let's give an example. Let's say your co-op is a bakery and you produce high-quality bread at a price point that most people in your community can afford and like to buy. In fact, your co-op bakery is not only popular, but well-loved across a spectrum of the entire community, which has provided a great deal of goodwill value in the business. Now let's say a social impact investment organization has approached your bakery with the idea to provide an injection of capital investment for upgrades and improvements through performance-based payments and measurable results and outcomes for services provided to, say, the unhoused in your community. The problem, of course, is that's not really what your bakery does. Your bakery makes bread and is a worker-owned cooperative of bakers. The bakers don't have a background in running a soup kitchen or a lunch program. But if they accept the funding with all its stipulations, the co-op is forced to split their focus and change their mission entirely to meet the outcomes of the investment. When this happens, the owner-workers need to shift focus from the main business of baking bread to splitting their attention between baking and something which no one in the business has any experience with.
Keeping in mind, when the social impact investor comes knocking on your small business or co-op door to sell you success through rebranding or expansion, it's always something that they claim will achieve a positive social impact, like benefiting an underprivileged section of society, such as the unhoused or single mothers. Social impact investors market their investment instruments as a way to make a positive difference, but for the most part, they don't. Critics have pointed out that they often do more harm than good. More often than not, they create a situation or environment that keeps people poor by providing partial services, perpetuating a need for more services, which in turn provides incentive for the impact investment organization to create another bond or investment opportunity to meet that need, and so on. Investors are rewarded if the co-op meets the agreed upon outcomes, but lose their investment if the co-op does not meet those outcomes. So the incentive, if the co-op accepts the investment, is to radically change their business model, which may lead to a reduction in the quality of the product and a reduction in service. And at the end of the day, there has been no real benefit to the unhoused in the community or the quality of life for the community at large. At the same time, the co-op could lose its worker-owner status because the social impact organization has created a situation that requires outside staff and management that aren't part of the group or owner workers who started the business.
The result of a contrived feel-good concept forced on a worker-owned business to promote a positive spin from an impact investment can negatively affect the business and move it away from its original mission. At the same time, the outcomes and results of the impact investment may be met on paper, but the true impact on the issue at hand goes unaddressed. However, in the end, the investors are paid, and the social impact organization can capitalize on the concept of the co-op and its positive effects like worker dignity, economic justice, and equity. This in turn can be used to market the concept to other investors for other social impact financial instruments. Meanwhile, the co-op bakery in our example has lost its original value to the community. The worker-owner bakers are undermined and have to take a cut in pay, and the concept of a successful bakery offering affordable goods to a local community has been reshaped into something unrecognizable to the locals.
Co-ops and worker-owned businesses have an important role in our communities and offer an alternative to business as usual. They could also provide a way to create new forms of exchange or alternative economies if the need presents itself. The strength of the co-op is the combination of owning the means of production with others and self-employment. These are the positive aspects that change lives and communities and are the very things that attract social impact investing to co-ops. But like other forms of capital investment, it's important to understand what kind of impact investments can have on a business. In conventional bank loans or business loans, borrowers have to understand what the terms of the loan are. Since these are more conventional, the risks and returns are more easily understood.
However, social impact investing is another animal altogether. Although co-ops and worker-owned businesses are an attractive sector for social impact investing, it's important to remember that impact investors like the story of the investment more than the investment itself. In addition, social impact investment organizations and investors have negative preconceived notions surrounding co-ops that could create a feeling of contempt for the type of business being invested in, which doesn't encourage a positive business relationship.
At the bedrock of a community, small democracies are formed that work through horizontal relationships. Leadership still exists, but it's cooperative in nature. Various co-ops throughout the country are in danger of disappearing due to the predatory nature of social impact investments. This idea of a store or a public service or even a brand you see on your grocery store shelf as being worker-owned is quickly evaporating. To have functioning direct democracy with people-powered initiatives and collective autonomy that benefit each individual neighborhood or community, co-ops need to stay true to their vision and not be seduced by the marketing of the social impact investor. They must remain true to themselves. Too much is at stake.
Shirts, come on, queen, make it work. What's your dream? A-list perks, champagne fountains, quench your thirst. Surf and turf until you burst. Hanging on the bridge with James T. Kirk, chasing them aliens, saving Earth. Yeah, we celebrate our quirks. Wave your freak flag, twirl that purse, make them freak fans go berserk. Scream your name, buy your merch, chase that dream until it hurts. Drop that verse, make it work. Just how it works, things get going from bad to worse. You lose your flow and your sense of purse, but still you're gonna have to make it work. On with the show even if it hurts. This is live, no dress rehearsal, no do-overs, no reversals. Basic facts, not controversial. Making it work is universal. Now cut the commercial. Whatever your dream is, you can be the one, you can get it, son. But it ain't gonna come till the work is done, so stick to business, get those funds. Might not always finish first, but we make it work.